Okay, so welcome and thank you so much for giving up an hour of your time to join us this evening or this morning, depending on where you are in the world. It's 10 o'clock at night in Montreal, Canada, where I am right now. Gary mentioned something really important, that we will be recording this video and it will be available to you on YouTube, but not just to you, also to other teachers. So I'm sure you know other teachers who may find this interesting or useful in different ways. So take the time to share it with a few other people and let other people know some new ideas and some ways of dealing with some of the problems we're facing today. We're talking about teaching listening and speaking to young learners, ages 3 to 6. Okay, so I want to start off by talking about 3 myths. We get a lot of feedback when we're teaching very young learners. You say, 3-year-olds, like, why would you be teaching English to 3-year-olds? They can barely speak their first language. Why are we trying to teach them something else? For those parents who sometimes say that, or friends of parents who sometimes say that, we have to deal with some of these ideas. So one of them is that young learners will not remember what they learn. And this is a big thing. They're saying they're so young, they'll forget everything they're learning in class. Why do you put them in English class? They're not going to remember this after a while, right? So basically, they say it's not really worth doing. But this is one of those false things. And so I want to tell you a little story about this that says something important about what we're doing in the primary classroom and for the very, very young nursery sort of classroom and kindergarten classroom. Once I met the mother of an American friend. She had been born in China in the 1930s, and she lived there until she was 3. So I went to a dinner with my friend and her mother, who had come from Wisconsin, and we were talking about this. And did she remember anything? Well, not really, not very much. My friend's Chinese teacher was also there. And of course, his question was, did you learn any Chinese? And the mother said, oh, no, I was too young. And then she thought for a moment and she said, well, I remember just one phrase. And she said, 那是一个非常讨吃的女孩. And so anyway, it was interesting to sort of hear her say this. And what does it mean? We said, well, what does that mean? And it says, it was, you are a very naughty girl. And it was something that the family helper said to her all the time. So that was the one thing that when she was 3 years old, that was the one sentence of Chinese that she learned. Now, there's something interesting about this. A couple of things, actually. First of all, that was 60 years before, 60 years ago when she was just 3 years old, and now she was 63. And the other thing that was interesting was not just that she remembered for so long, but also the Chinese teacher said, you know what, your pronunciation is perfect. It is absolutely the way that a Chinese speaker would say this. So that was kind of exciting as well. So it basically, what does this story tell us? What does this story tell us? Students often learn unexpected things, but young children in particular learn the sound system of a target language in ways that really the rest of us can only dream of. They really get the sound system down and their pronunciation is perfect. But that's because they're exposed at this critical age, and we'll talk about this in a sec, at this critical age when their brains are open to this. So such learners, they have a head start later in life when they learn again. So for example, she never studied Chinese. Her parents took her back to the United States, and for whatever reason, she didn't have any more exposure to Chinese speakers. But if she had gone back, say as a university student and studied Chinese, she would have had a big head start. So that's one myth that we can crush. Myth number two: learning a second language is too hard, and people often say this, particularly people who only speak one language. They say, "Oh, it's too hard to learn a second language," but in fact, of course, there are so many people who learn many languages. I have a few friends who speak 4 or 5 languages. Many Europeans. Our best friend is Swiss, so she speaks German and French and English and Italian, because those are the languages that are most popular in Switzerland. And then she also lived in China for many years, so she speaks Chinese. So and she just picked up Spanish on the side, right? So some people learn many languages, and what we know about language is if you learn a second language, it becomes easier and easier to learn a third, fourth, and a fifth language. So that's kind of good news for those of us who want to study language. Many kids learn multiple languages. And so, for example, most Arubans speak a minimum of 4 languages fluently. They Papiamento, which is the local language of their island. They speak Dutch because Aruba is a Dutch former colony. They speak English for tourists, and Spanish because the island is very close to Venezuela. Why am I talking about Aruba? maybe many of you have never heard of Aruba before. In Latin America, I think in Peru and Colombia, I know that you have, but maybe in Asia, you haven't heard about it before. Well, Aruba is a very small country, and yet most of them learn to speak these languages fluently. There's only 106,000 people who live in Aruba. Like, wow, they don't have a big economy. They don't have, universities and teacher training colleges. They have a little bit, but not a lot. So, how can they do this if they're actually quite a fairly poor country? So this is an interesting idea. So it's not, so the lesson here really is that they put some effort into it, but the expectation is often there that they should learn. Henry Widdowson is a great linguist. He's no longer with us, but he told this wonderful story, and it was about a mother. She was talking with her son's French teacher. The French teacher said, "I'm sorry, madam, your son is too stupid to learn French," right? Oh, what a horrible, terrible thing to say to someone about their child, right? But the mother replied, she said, "Well, please teach him whatever language stupid French children learn." So anyway, it's a kind of a joke, but the point is there. Everyone learns a language. Almost everyone in the world has learned at least one language. We can learn a second language, right? So what do these stories tell us? Well, students can learn English and other languages as well if they get an early start. So if we start them young and move on to that. Learning a language isn't dependent upon intelligence. It's more about good teachers. If you've got some good teachers, all young children will learn a second language, or a third or a fourth. Myth number 3: young students won't get a chance to use it. Why teach them? They won't, who are they going to talk to? They won't get a chance to use it. It's not like a university student who's going to travel or, get a job or do something else. So why rush? Why rush doing this? Well, this is also a myth or a problem statement. First of all, we know that language learning ability declines around age 18. Around age 18, really a number of things go against learning a language. And one of them are social changes. Kids simply become interested in many different things. They're going off to university. They've got a different lifestyle. And, so their attention span for learning a second language goes down. And of course, they're interested in boys and girls or each other. And so that makes changes as well. There's interference from the first language. If you've been studying your own first language for so long, at around age 18, it becomes a problem. It interferes because you no longer can, learn new words without questioning, like, why would you say that? Why don't they say something else? And that's not, you'll hear this all the time in language classrooms. That's not how we say it in English, right? Or whatever the first language is. Now, with young children, they don't push back like that. They just think it's a game. Learning a language is a secret code. And so they're excited about learning it. So the other thing has to do with continuing brain development. So there's different times at which the brain grows. And by around age 18, the cognitive level about learning new languages is actually going down. So we want to do it as early as possible. So there we are. Okay, so learning a language has many different benefits. And I know this because, I've learned different languages myself. My wife is bilingual in French and English. And we lived in the Middle East. I didn't study Arabic, but my sons did. This is my son's about 14 years ago. So the first day of school, we'll never forget this. The first day of school, young Spencer, he was 6 years old then, and he came back from school. And of course, what every parent asks every day: what did you learn at school today? And he told us he had learned a sentence in Arabic. It was the first sentence on the first page of his Arabic book. And what does that mean? And he says it's Omar Ela al-Sath, Omar Ela al-Sath. And it means Omar is on the roof. And I mean, I'm a language teacher. I spend my whole life creating textbooks and, teaching graduate students and doctoral students. I thought, why would you teach somebody like Omar is on the roof? That seems like such a crazy thing to teach someone. But of course, there was a reason for it. And that had to do with cultural ideas. So, I'm thinking about a roof, where we live in Montreal, and the roofs in Canada, because of the snow, they often are peaked, so that the snow and the rain will come off them. But in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi, where we were living, the roofs are flat. That's where you go up in the evening and you sit out and it's cooler, you catch the breeze, you talk with your friends, you have a meal, things like that. So there's a bit of a cultural learning opportunity there. With Spencer, we found it very, very interesting because, he did learn Arabic. He learned the whole alphabet, and he didn't have a great vocabulary in some ways because sometimes he just didn't know what the word meant, but he could still read it. So one day after we came back to Canada from the Middle East, he looked out and there was a sign. This word written on the side of a food truck. And he said, it says halal, halal. What does halal mean, right? And of course, halal in Arabic is the food which is the meat and things like that you were allowed to eat as a Muslim. So even though he didn't know the word, he could still read the alphabet and understand. Does he remember his Arabic now? Little bits. I mean, 14 years later, not really, because he hasn't been exposed to it. But I know that if he went back to university and studied Arabic again, he'd pick it up quickly. So it's not just how students use language. So students gain confidence when they know something others do not. He's very proud of himself when he could read the sign. And I think for him, it was like, wow, mommy and daddy are so smart, but they can't read this and I can. So it's something about being special, about being more able. It's a superpower of kinds for kids. So learning a language really is a superpower. So what do these stories tell us? First of all, it's never too early to learn a second language. Learning at age 2, 3, 4, that's 5, 6, 7, that's great. Learning a language builds confidence in the ability to learn. So when you start learning a language, you think, yes, learning a language is not so difficult. I could learn another language, or I could learn this language more. You realize what's involved in the job. When you learn something as a child, you're more open to relearning it as an adult. So these are all basically arguments I'm giving you for when a parent says to you, say, I don't know why he's studying English, or why does the school have English for such young children? These are your arguments to sort of go back and say, no, 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 it's a very, very good reason. It's the best time for them to start learning. Okay, so I want to focus mostly today about 4 ideas, 4 big ideas. One is, how do young brains learn? And we know that young brains do not learn the same way as adult brains or teenage brains. They work a little bit differently. We want to discuss what motivates young learners, like what makes them want to learn and pay attention in class, and more importantly, what makes them remember because they are motivated to think that something is useful for them. What step-by-step approaches can we use for teaching, listening, and speaking? That's our focus tonight. And engaging young learners for long-term benefits. Like, what can we do? What can we do to help make that happen? So let's, when we're talking today, I'm going to use a few examples. Very big thank you to eFuture to making this webinar possible. I'm talking about a series called Little Hands. I gave a talk earlier this year. Hand in Hand is a series for primary students. This is for the young ones, Little Hands. I love the title. And it's a 4-level series, starting with the very basic things, the nursery level, 1, 2, 3. And it comes with a ton of materials, posters. It even comes with a puppet of the little weasel guy. So, and there's lots of digital materials as well. So anyway, I'm just going to use some examples. Doesn't matter. If you're teaching students of a different age, it doesn't matter. It's going to be a lot of the principles will be the same, even if you're using another book, right? Okay, so how young brains learn. Let's start off with the first point here. All right, so we can think about a great learner, a great thinker, and that's Albert Einstein. When he was 5 years old, actually Einstein was a very, very late language learner. In a curious way, he had a sort of a latency period, we call it, where he listened, he understood, people talked all around him, but he never talked back. He never talked back. He would never say anything. In fact, they were a little bit worried that maybe he, was not quite intelligent. Actually, they thought maybe he was going to have some mental problems. Finally, one day at dinner, his first words were not "mom" or "doggy" or anything like that. His first words were at dinner one night, and he said, "The soup is too hot." And everybody stopped and they looked at him. They said, Albert, you can speak." He nodded. They said, "Why didn't you speak before?" He said, "Because the soup was not hot." So his language development was a little different. His brain was a little bit different. But when he was age 5, Einstein was sick one day in bed, and his father gave him a compass to look at, probably showed him, say, yeah, the red part points to the north. And he spent the whole day just looking at the compass, thinking about it, trying to understand how it worked and what was going on with it. Soon after this, around the same time, Einstein's mother gave him a violin. Einstein's parents did not plan for him to become a genius. I know that everybody now, it's true for me. When you have kids, you think, oh, they will be geniuses, right? They simply wanted to arouse his interest in science, and they wanted to give him a love of music. They didn't push him into physics at all. They never really thought that was important. They didn't point him in that direction. But they did something really, really smart with the compass and with the violin, because between the ages of 2 to 7, that the brain has its first critical growth spurt. The second occurs during the teenage years. So, but this is the time when your brain is really, really growing. In fact, the number of connections between brain cells, between your brain cells, that we call them synapses, it doubles. So these synapses, these connections, actually, children ages 2 to 7 have twice the links between these brain's neurons as adults. So their brain are twice as complicated as adult brains. After they hit adolescence, they start going down. Of course, as we age, we start losing some of those brain cells. Although, thank goodness, all the evidence shows that if we continue making a real effort at learning, exposing ourselves to new ideas, picking up languages when we're older, or musical instruments, those are things which continue to help our brain to regrow. So it's a key time to learn, ages 2 to 7. So what should these students learn? So if we're say, okay, what should they learn? Well, Sriram says there's a number of things. There's some references at the end of this. We're going to share a PDF of the PowerPoint with you. It'll be available at the end of this. You can just click on it and download it. And the references are there as well. Some great articles. So the first of all, what should these students learn? They should learn a love of learning, a breadth instead of depth, emotional intelligence, music, and language. And language, of course, is what we're talking about. Let's discuss these one at a time. So a love of learning. It's important for students to associate learning with enjoyment, learning with enjoyment. So this is actually from one of the books, Little Hands, and I love this illustration. It's something every parent should do, has to do, which is to read to your children. I read to my children long after they could read themselves. I didn't just stop and say, "Oh, you can read the book, you can do it." No. I enjoyed it so much. My wife and I used to fight who's going to get to read to the kids. And often as a family, the four of us would sit by their beds and the boys in their beds. And we would take turns in reading stories and making up stories and all sorts of things like that. But our children associated reading with enjoyment, and thank goodness they are still great readers. They both enjoy novels and reading other books. So it's a good thing to do. So we want to foster that love of learning. So getting them having materials in the classroom which are engaging, but also give them positive feelings about learning is important. Education, going back to Albert again, just this last time, is education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned at school. When I was younger, I couldn't figure out what that meant. I didn't get it. Education, learning at school, but you forget it. Isn't an education what you learn? And you realize, no, it's not just all the facts and figures and, Seoul is the capital of Korea, things like that. It's really learning how to learn. And it's having a love of learning throughout your entire life. And so students who love learning continue to learn. So it's a big thing. But if they have negative attitudes, they have poor teachers who don't encourage them, parents who don't encourage them to learn, then of course their interest in learning drops off. The second one is the breadth instead of depth. Breadth instead of depth. This is just, and it's in the research. Again, Sriram talks about this, but basically it's important to cover a wide range of topics at this age. As students get older, and especially in the teenage years, you want to go for depth. You want students to learn more and more and more about a single subject. Just keep on digging deeper and deeper to try to find out more about that single subject. My wife was talking to me just before the presentation this evening, and she was visiting friends in Toronto, and one of the women sews, but she sets herself a project to sew. She's very good, but every time she does it, she chooses something more difficult to do, plans it all out. She's of an age and a mental set about going deeper and deeper. So she's a deep learner. Breadth instead of depth is it's important to expose to young learners to as many ideas as possible. They're exceptionally good at making connections between ideas and building unexpected insights. This is the amazing thing. Students learn a lot more than what we teach. It's not, you used to think that, the teacher would teach and the students would open up their heads, you just pour it all in there. It's not like that. It's not like that at all. Really what's happening is they're looking at things and maybe thinking about things that you're not really discussing. So they look at a picture like this and they start making certain connections. Now, there's a certain amount of language here. It's obviously playground equipment like seesaws, swings, benches, but students age 2 to 7 are more open to, sorry, did we miss one? Yeah, so making connections. So here they might make connections between some of the different things that they see here. They might say, oh, that's a tree, or that tree is bigger tree. So all of a sudden, maybe they've learned something somewhere else and they're trying to express it. They might say, oh, there's two, and they're using their counting words. There's two seesaws, right? There's two tires on the tree, right? That tree has 4 branches in the back. The other one has 3. So they start making ideas and connections, and it's not always just what you teach them. And that's why we want to have really engaging materials. Students ages 2 to 7 are more open to developing their emotional intelligence. And this is so important. It's so important for us to be developing this at this age. This is where they learn how to act around other people, but also how to manage their own emotions. So we've had already in this, you've seen this one all about the emotions, but to recognize, when you're angry, what are you angry about? And even if you're angry, how do you behave? And this is the age at which they start having to control themselves. It's really important to focus on polite language, getting students to help in different ways with helping each other, like in the classroom, helping each other, and giving them small chores to do, little tasks that they can do or that they can accomplish, and in different ways, making them responsible. So kindergarten teachers know all about this because you spend all class trying to organize the students to take more and more responsibility and also to develop empathy. So again, having polite language in the books, you can extend that into the classroom. These characters are role models. That's what they see. They see role models. They don't just see illustrations of something. Music and language, also extremely important. Again, we saw Einstein had both of these. Music and language and acting. We see in this series, whenever students learn something new, try to help them store it in different parts of their brains. Read, write, listen, and speak, but also sing, dance, and act. Every time you take some information and you think about it in different ways, and that goes for you too as teachers, as adults, every time you take a piece of information and you put it in different parts of your brain, you're more likely to remember it. You have to remember something important, write it down. Then read it out loud. Then all of a sudden you're hearing, you're speaking, you're reading, you're writing, and it's different parts of the brain. If you do a little dance with the things, I need to buy bananas or something, you won't forget, right? It's just a way to sort of preserve, to learn. So again, but what should students not learn? What should they not learn? So there's a few things here. It's just as important. Young children should not be told that they're just preparing for real learning. This is getting you ready for grade 1 or grade 2 or something like that. It's not what we tell students, because what they are doing in the nursery school, in the kindergarten, that is just as important as what they will learn later. In fact, it might be more important. They should not be taught that it's okay to give up. So students get frustrated if they can't do something, they throw their paper and their pencils or their crayons on the floor. They get angry, but you never say, okay, let's give up. Let's do something else. Never. Just say, all right, maybe now is not a good time to do this. Let's put the paper and let's put the crayons and we'll look at it later. So you're going to do it again. You can take a break, but don't give up. Don't let students give up. They should not be told that they are smart. What? This was so surprising to me when I became a parent. I always thought, oh, you must always tell your children that they're smart. Actually, all the research shows that it's not very helpful to students. It's not very helpful because there's the difference between an act and a state. A state, like, are you always a smart person? Or is it just that you've done one smart thing, right? Of course, if you do one smart thing and another one, and another one, and another one, you're becoming smarter. There's no problem. But when we tell students that they're smart, they often start to think that they're really good at something, and then they don't try. There's a very famous, many of you will know the PISA scores. PISA scores internationally, they look at students' standings on a number of tests, particularly math, right? So their math abilities. There was a number of years ago, there was a really interesting finding because they added another question. They had the students do the math test, and they asked them afterwards. They say, "How do you think you did? How well do you think they did?" Curiously, this happened. The Koreans this particular year came out number one in the test scores, number one. But for some reason, when they asked them, how well did you do, they say, oh, I could have done better. I didn't do very well. I'm sure I failed it, right? And they were very humble. They were very, very humble. And yet the Americans all thought they were great. They said, oh yeah, math is my subject. I'm excellent. Because that's what they had been told forever. But you know the end of the story. They were at the bottom ranking. They were the lowest ranking ones. This has changed quite a bit now because people have become, much more aware of this. But it's because they kept on telling them, you're so smart, you're so smart, you're so smart, that they gave up trying. So they just thought it was natural and they didn't have to try. So don't do that. Okay, instead focus on the short term. I can see you've worked hard on this. It's positive. You're saying something really nice to the students. You've done a good job, right? You don't have to say you're smart forever, but just good job on this. Also asking questions. Did you try your best, right? And the student will say, yes, I tried my best. That's great. That's good. Or they'll say, I think I could do better. And as again, with the last question, how do you feel about your work? How do you feel about your work? And, some they can say happy, or so-so, or sad, or I could, maybe they'll say they could do it again. So again, it's focusing on making them responsible and making them critical about their own work, even at a very, very young age, right? Okay, so the second of the four things I wanted to talk about is what motivates young learners. What motivates young learners? Well, young learners are motivated by many different things. And one of them is play. Okay, so in fact, I kind of thought about this and I thought, is it really play? Because when I used to watch my own children when they were very young, when they played, they were never really playing. They were working. They were so serious. They took it like so serious when they were little Lego blocks and putting it together. And it was the most important thing. It's also why, children at this age, when you say, okay, put it away, it's time for dinner. No, I'm not finished yet. It's time for dinner. I told you 3 times. No, I just have to finish this. It's not because they're playing. It's because they think it's work and they consider it work. So that's kind of an interesting thing. So, but they are motivated by play. And if anything is fun and enjoyable, of course, they want to do it. The curious thing is, we can often structure things to be play. So this, you can see this game and you can guess, what is it? It's a slide. What are they? They are swings. That's the key language that we're using here. So it's really just talking about a singular and plural. This could be a grammar lesson, right? But by presenting it in a game-like format, it's more memorable. The students enjoy it more, and it's a break from other activities. What else? Young learners are motivated by things that surprise and delight them. And so this one, I think you can guess. This is really, really teaching about colors, and the students have to trace around the different pictures so they know which one is which when you're talking about them. But this, just by having the butterfly in there. The butterfly to me is a little delight. It's a little bit of a surprise. There's lots of other plants, but the butterfly is different. So they kind of like that. They kind of like that. So trace and say, they're learning those things. Students like variety. So again, the textbooks understand this, and all textbooks try to give a lot of variety by repeating the same ideas in different formats. Not just writing the same thing, but actually doing something physical. Here you can see someone is sharing with the other students what they've done. It's all good. It's all good. It looks really great. It's great to have that variety. By the opportunity to socialize with peers, with other students, that's what they really enjoy. They like spending time with each other. And your challenge as a teacher, again, when you have them playing games together or doing something together like a game, your challenge is to get them using the target language as much as possible. So again, when they're at a very low level, it can be a little difficult, but you push, and they get there. They like the chance, and this is a surprising one, although not for parents, I think, is they love the chance to please others. I love, we have a park close to our house, and we always laugh when we see the little kids, because every 2 minutes, say, look at me, mommy, look at what I'm doing, look at me. And they're just constant. And I remember my own kids at that age. But really, what they're trying to do is not showing off. They're actually trying to please others. So again, what is this page all about? Something we mentioned earlier, emotional intelligence. It's so important. But it's really a key thing, is to be able to help other people, be nice to other people, and imagine how you would feel in this situation. So again, creating materials or having materials that help you do this is really, really important, right? I'll just mention one small detail. These books also, throughout this series and the primary series, hand in hand, they focus also on different subjects. So you see this one has something to do with social studies, and there's other ones to do with math and science. It's basically trying to teach these other subjects so that they embed the language into other topics that they'll be studying. Okay, so now not all students are motivated. You know that. They're not all motivated in the same way. They're not all motivated at the same time. But it's the teacher's job to try again, to try to keep finding ways to motivate them, to get them really interested in what they're learning in the classroom. And one thing, I can't say this enough, I've mentioned it already once, but ask the students, say, what motivates you, or what do you want to do, or what would be fun? Just do that once in a while, especially if you've done a few activities. So, find different approaches with different activities, but elicit that learner feedback. Did you like that task? Should we do it again, today or another day? And try to find out from students. Most of the time you'll hear them laughing, or they'll be really focused, or they'll be enjoying it in some way. Pay attention, and use that to build your next lessons. Okay, the third one is step-by-step approaches to teaching, listening, and speaking. In fact, we could have probably a couple of hours just talking about this. There's so many different things, so I'm just going to touch on a few ideas. But I hope that some of you will share maybe this video with other teachers, and maybe discuss some of these things, whatever works for you. Too often, as teachers, we're by ourselves in the classroom, and we don't get to see all the tips and tricks of other teachers. So take some time to share that. Okay, so what do we teach in listening and speaking? Well, there's all this big chart with this scientific language, but it's really about the sounds that we make and how we make them. That's the speech sounds, or the phonetics, the sounds of English, those sounds in words, phrases and sentences, the surface meanings of what we're saying, and then we go to the deeper meanings of things. So the sounds we made, the p, how do you make that sound? The sounds of English, when it starts to become a little more meaningful, pr, or pre, and then all of a sudden, how does that work with grammar? So the difference between phonetics and phonology is, is all of a sudden pre can come at the beginning of a sentence, but I don't think it comes at the end of the sentence. Somebody will correct me, but pre usually is a prefix, not a suffix that comes at the end. Those sounds, how do they work in different words? Pretty is interesting because actually it doesn't have the meaning of pre to come before. Pretty, that's interesting. Phrases and sentences, now we're in trouble. Pretty hairy. Pretty, beautiful. Hairy, like my face, right? I'm growing a beard. But pretty hairy has a different surface meaning. And that pretty hairy, when something's pretty hairy, means very dangerous. But a deeper meaning of it is that it's a casual way of saying something is dangerous. So we're teaching a lot of different things when we're teaching language. We're also focusing on a lot of different things. And it's important in the classroom to focus on one at a time. Try dealing with pronunciation and try dealing with stress separately, rhythm separately, fluency separately, meaning separately. Don't try teaching them all together at the same time. So it's a big mistake that teachers try to give an overview. Say pretty hairy. Say it with me, pretty hairy. Okay, stress, pretty hairy. Rhythm, say it again. And they're doing all of this together, and the students, their heads are going around in circles. They can't keep track. So especially with young learners, focus on one thing. Let's talk about how do we say it. Pretty hairy. All right. Okay. I don't think you're going to teach that to young learners, but that's something. When you're correcting students, how do you correct them? Well, there's two ways. We can give a detailed correction, or we can do what's called a recast. So a correction is where we explain something. You say, no, that's not how you say it, or that's the wrong word, or that's the wrong grammar. A recast is when you just say it back to the student, but you say it in the correct way. It's a difficult one because very young students can't necessarily take what they hear and turn it into what they say. My brother, when he was very young, he used to say, remember, instead of remember. My older sisters thought this was hilarious. And they say, it's not remember, it's remember. Say remember. He said, remember. And no, not remember. Remember. Say it, remember. He'd never get it right. And then he'd say library, not library, library. So anyway, it's difficult for young children, but still we try recast. So if a student says something, say, I want go home. You say, you want to go home, right? So you're filling in the words. It's important to correct errors, like really when they're making systematic mistakes. But everybody makes mistakes in their speech. I make mistakes in my speech. So don't worry about short, small mistakes that people just make once or twice because they're speaking quickly or their mind is somewhere else. Use recast to model correct speech. Young learners react well to recast because they think they're in a conversation. They don't always understand that the recast is happening, but they just sort of listening and they think it's just part of the conversation. Start with what students already know. Ask students, or better yet, ask students to ask each other. What is that? Questions, very simple. They can ask each other. Telling versus asking. When we have a new page and we're talking about something here, you see the language is tight. Happy birthday, thank you. Are you happy? Yes, I'm happy. So very, very tight speech, but you can also ask other questions for students. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Other things like that. Not every student will know everything, but some students are aware of some things. We want to make students aware of what they know and what others know and of what they don't know. But maybe they think they know. So you might ask questions like, what can you tell me about the picture? You might be surprised because every student comes into class with a little bit different vocabulary, and they may have seen a cartoon or something or read a comic, and so they've learned a little bit of the language. So give them the opportunity to share what they know. So learners know a lot. together. Not every student knows everything, otherwise they shouldn't be in your class. They should be teaching it maybe, but together they might know a lot. So you look at this simple picture and there's so much vocabulary there for them to explore. So the birthday, the party, food, people, gifts, decorations, sub-levels of cake and drinks, mom and dad, other relatives, box, wrapping, ribbon, balloons, happy music, happy birthday. So there's lots of different things they could talk about, but you'll never know if you don't ask them. So ask, take time to ask, right? So listening, ask students. Also, when you're getting them to listen, it's very important to say, okay, listen with your eyes. What does that mean? Listen with your ears and listen with your heart. I love this. I love this. What does it mean? Listen with your eyes. Look at the speaker. You don't want students like so many people, with their mobile phones these days. You're having a conversation with them and they're just, looking at their phone instead of you. It's rude. It's rude. Actually, it's also when you're learning a language, it's very difficult because when we learn new words, the best way to learn is looking at the facial expression of speakers. The facial expression tells you a lot about the mood, about the tone, about the focus, so many different things, the formation of the lips, where the tongue is, what the teeth are doing. Those are all important things to forming words. So look at the speaker. Ask students to do this. Listen with your eyes. Listen with your ears. And it's basically just giving students a purpose, and you can add to this purpose. Say, Jody is going to tell us how many cats she has. How many cats do you have? So listen for the number, listen to understand the number, right? So you're giving them a purpose for listening. Listen with your heart. Listen with your heart is think how the speaker feels. So this is really asking students to empathize. Empathize is a big word. We can't really say that to young children. They don't understand. But it's really about putting themselves in the place of the other student. So when someone else is speaking and they're a little nervous or they're stuttering or they make mistakes, you want to put your heart where their heart is and feel for them and not just laugh or ignore them or something. You want to try to help them, and you can help them by putting your heart out there. So these are important things. One big thing is to give speaking prompts. Write these down, put them up in the classroom. These are just great guide speaking prompts. I agree with you because, and that's what the students can put in the answer. I disagree with you because I like what you said about this. I think maybe something else. I heard you say something about something. Let me say more. So these simple prompts, put them on a poster, throw them up on the wall, and then again, the students know what to say because it's guiding them. It's guiding them a little bit. So it makes it a little bit easier for them to remember. And of course, these are important tags that we can use. Fourth one, the fourth of the four things is engaging learners for long-term benefits. Long-term benefits. So what do we do for long-term benefits? To improve listening and speaking, this sounds silly, but get students reading. Of course, get them to listening more and get them speaking more. Of course, that's obvious. And what are they going to listen to speak about? Get them to listen to cartoons on television or radio programs in English. Get them to talk with friends about things, give presentations to the class about what their favorite shows are, but also get them reading. So encourage students with the joys of reading. Instead of just reading to students, ask them to read in pairs and groups. So doing that if they can, and get them to read aloud and talk about what they read. Reading aloud is really quite different from reading silently. When you're reading silently, you're really reading for meaning, and you're not always understanding the pronunciation or practicing the pronunciation. But it's also about making a connection with other people. My wife and I, just last week, we read a book together. Actually, over the whole week, we just took turns reading and we read the book together. It's a wonderful thing to do as an adult, and it's even more so with children. So take turns reading, have everybody read parts of it, but it's different to read aloud. With all skills, give guiding questions to get students talking. What happens in the story? Who is in the story? Do you like the story? Why? What would you do if, you were the character or could fly or do whatever? Is it a true story? Why or why not? Why do you think so? And it doesn't matter what the answer is. The point of this and all the questions is really just to get the students talking more. Who do you want to be in the story? Why, right? I want to be the dragon. The dragon is tough, something. And they'll have their own reasons and their own ideas. But again, the answers don't matter. The answers do not matter. What matters is they're talking more. They're listening, and they're speaking a lot more. And that's really what we want. Okay, make the classroom a place to explore. So this particular series, I already mentioned, it comes with a puppet, but it also comes with posters. I also love students when they make their own posters. You see a little example of hair designs. It's up on the wall. It's different sorts of hair. I love that. I think when students make posters, nothing better, really. It's so much good practice. They focus. And the biggest part of it all for me is the pride that they feel. They've done something wonderful and it's up on the wall. It's like for me to get a painting into the Louvre Museum next to the Mona Lisa or something, right? For kids, that's how they feel. They feel like in the most important place, they see their work up on the wall. It validates it. So again, they become also very critical about, what they're doing. So they say, I could do better. And which is a phrase that I love to hear from young children. I could do better. I could try again. And so maybe they go and they improve that in some way. But again, your classroom should be a place to explore. Sometimes that's difficult. Sometimes now it's like a university where every day you go to a different classroom and there's 30 classes there. It's just, nobody has the classroom the way they do in primary school. But if you have the room and if you have the space, then definitely it's something that you should do. But get the students doing the work, put it up on the wall. What will spark conversation is the question you have to ask yourself. What will spark conversation, will make students talk in English using the target language? So every time you put something on the board or the wall, add a question to it. So for example, I see this picture of this tree in this picture. If this was my classroom, maybe I'd say, okay, we need to put things onto the tree. What grows on trees? So I'd put that as the question, what grows on trees? And then I'd ask the students to start making things to put on the tree. It would be a wonderful tree. The tree would have apples on, oranges and peaches and plums and bananas, even anything. It would all go onto the tree, coconuts, and why not? So again, the students, you're asking a question so that they will start a conversation. In this particular activity I just explained to you, fantastic. They go home, they start thinking about things. And anytime you force the students to think outside of the classroom about their English, you win, they win. Everybody wins. Okay, so also add activities. You can add activities such as asking students to put stickers or check marks on things that you like. You don't have to buy expensive stickers or things. If you find a sticker for anything, like on groceries, just cut it up into little squares and the kids can draw on them as well. Peel it off and put it up, So even a sticker that you get on an apple or something, just put it up. So you don't just have to use that. I was at a conference and somebody handed out little tiny stickers and just to put up, which one is your favorite? So they had to go around and it was just an interesting way to make it interactive. What about online learning? Online learning. It's still an issue for so many of us. We thought COVID was over. It seems like it will never be over. So what about online learning? Most important thing we can do is to work with parents. If the kids are at home and they're probably going to have a mother or father sitting there or a sibling sometimes, we should get them involved, not just, running the computer and making sure that the student is sitting and paying attention, but find ways to get them involved. And the best way is for learners to always teach their parents, right? All kids love to be teachers. They love to tell somebody else what to do. So what they're learning. So it doesn't matter if the parents or the grandparents or siblings or even the pets, I don't care, they can teach the dog English. It's not necessary for them to be English speakers. They say, this is how you say, happy birthday, grandma. You say it now. Happy birthday, grandma. No, it's not. Try it again. Happy birthday, grandma. And the child is, of course, practicing and bonding with the parent or the grandparent. Fantastic. So get them involved in different ones with different projects. Set up these student projects related to the texts and the work that you're doing in class. So ideal speaking and listening tasks can use a phone's camera or the video, right? So every home has, almost everybody in the world seems to have at least one phone. So ask students to video or take photos of 9, say, red things in the home. So this one is about red ball, the language is red and whatever. So I did this. I went around my home. It's my pen, my garbage can next to my desk. There's some art, my jacket, these flowers behind me, my chair that I'm sitting on. So again, it's, and then ask students to talk about what they see. So it's something that's going to be different for every student, but kind of interesting. And everybody has some things in color or something, or shapes or whatever you're talking about, or numbers, whatever it is. Again, even if the parent does not speak English, the project work can involve the whole family in learning. So lots of information in a very short time. Again, a reminder that there is a video of this that you can share with your other teachers, or you can review it yourself if you're interested. What do we know about teaching young learners? Several things. I'm just going to talk about 5. 1, there are many reasons to teach young learners English. There's, it's not that they're not too young. It's good to teach them, and there's reasons to do that. Young brains are at a critical stage to enhance learning. They're going to learn a lot more quickly, a lot more efficiently and effectively. Young learners are motivated by variety, by challenges, and by fun. So work with that, create that variety, create challenges in the classroom for them to do things and make it fun. Listening and speaking needs step-by-step approaches. Try to figure out how to do that. And again, in particular, I just mentioned this again, don't overcorrect, and don't try to teach, 5 things at the same time. Narrow it down, just pronunciation, or just meaning, or just something else, and then move on to the next one later. Engaging young learners long-term has countless benefits in turning them to lifelong language learners. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Maybe, Gary, we have some time for questions now, if I haven't gone too long, a couple minutes, yeah?
Yeah, we got a couple minutes. So we do have one question here, just came in. So it says, hi, Dr. Ken Beatty. Thank you very much for sharing valuable knowledge in the seminar. I want to ask you how to engage my children with the joys of reading. So we kind of have on the reading portion side. Sometimes he can speak separate English words, such as colors or his toys. However, when I asked him to learn alphabet, he refused. Can you help me to help him to become a young reader? This is a 4-year-old.
Okay, great, fantastic. Yeah, he may not want to learn the alphabet, but I think that there's different tricks you can use. When my children were very, very young and they went off to kindergarten and school, I always wrote messages in their lunches. I would write a little note. I'd often cut paper and fold things up and make it so like people folds out and things like that. I put that in their lunch because it gave them a reason to read. I gave them a reason to use the alphabet. And if you want to really make it happen, you can start putting labels on different things around the house. And a great one is like like cans or jars or something, and put the name on it. And then, if the child wants something, say, okay, I've got 3 jars. One has candy in it. one has this, one has, something you don't like or whatever. Which one is it? And it's the two of the same, they can't see through it. So they think, oh, and again, suddenly they have a reason for learning it, So always try to think, why would it be useful for him to learn the alphabet? Why would it be useful for him to see things? And the other thing I just want to add here about reading, a friend, I went over to a friend's house once, and she said, "Oh, Ken, you're a professor. Our kids, they used to love reading. They loved reading. They read all the time, and now they don't want to read at all. They just we were we had just had dinner. We're sitting in the living room. I looked around. I said, 'Where are your books?' And she said, 'What?' I said, 'Do they ever see you reading?' And she said, 'We read before bed, I said, 'They don't see you reading. They don't think it's a valid activity. You're not doing it. Why should they do it?' Right? So that's another small detail is make sure that you're reading in front of kids and enjoying. I mean, one thing, nothing is more interesting for children if you're reading something and laughing, right? They'll say, 'What are you laughing about?' Say, 'Oh, look, and it could be a comic book or a comic strip or something like that. That's the other thing. A comic book, kids will learn because the words complement the pictures. So they'll look at the pictures. They say, 'What does it say? What does it say?' Well, you figure it out, right? So there's different ways. Yeah. So those are some ideas. Yeah.
So
Any other questions?
we'll do one more here.
Okay.
So can you speak to the difference on pronunciation between learning a language for a few hours a week in class versus learning in an immersive environment?
Right. Okay. So yeah. So ideally, immersive environments are fantastic. I think also if you're a teenager, if you get a girlfriend or a boyfriend who doesn't speak English, speak your language and only speaks the target language, that's ideal. But we can't all do that. Yeah. So we try to do the best that we can. Of course, it's better to learn in an immersive environment if you can, but most of us cannot. So 2 or 3 hours a week, maybe that's all you can do. The point is to maximize the impact of those 2 or 3 hours a week. It's just like the book. You look at the books, that I was showing you in this session today. Yeah, if you look at the book in class for 5 minutes and you close the book and you go on and do something else, if that's the last time you use the book, it's a nightmare, right? Students have to go home. They have to look at the book again. They have to have other activities. You have to go back to pages that you've already looked at, review things. And so outside of class, students can be doing a lot more. So that's the biggest challenge, is to say, okay, I want you this week to be doing this, and always giving students projects to collect information or to collect words, just simply like the 9 things that I took that were red. It's a very simple sort of an activity. They come in and say, "Oh, what is this one called?" And say, "Oh, it's my teddy bear. He's brown," and say, "Okay, well, what's your teddy bear's name?" It starts a conversation. You can maybe only go to 3 hours of classes a week, but you can think about English all week long. So we just have to create ways for that to happen. One of my big tricks always was to ask students Monday morning, say randomly, you just ask the students, "Tell me, how was your weekend? What did you do this weekend?" And of course, initially, if you're teaching teenagers, they'll say nothing, right? But you push them. A curious thing happens. At first, nobody wants to say anything, or they say so little, they don't say very much. But then all of a sudden, after a few weeks, on Sunday night, the students just going down to bed, they, oh no, Dr. Beatty's going to ask me what I did this weekend, right? And it's amazing because after a few weeks, everybody comes in prepared to talk about it because they don't want to be embarrassed. So again, give them a purpose for learning, for practicing, for reviewing, for, remembering English. Just make it part of their lives. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So that's going to be all the time that we have today. So Dr. Ken Beatty does have his email there on the slide. So there were a few more questions. So if you guys want to either forward those to us that we can give to Dr. Ken Beatty, or you can contact him through the email on his slide. And
absolutely,
my colleagues have put in some links in the chat. So if you guys are looking for your certificates, be sure to fill out the survey that my colleagues are putting in the chat. So once you fill that out, you will be getting your certificates. And as well, as we have stated before, the recording of today's webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So be sure to check that out and subscribe, and you can review the contents from today on the video. So again, one last big thank you to Dr. Ken Beatty for giving us his time today. And we will be back again next month with another webinar. So be sure to look out for that on our social media, which is again posted in the chat. So thank you guys again for attending today, and we'll see you all next month.
Great. Thank you, Gary. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.